You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
Hi, I'm Annie in America.
And I'm Johanna from Austria, and you're listening to your favorite international podcast. The podcast hosted, as you heard, by two women on and from different continents who never met in real life, but who kind of made it their life goal to give you all the unnecessary knowledge you never knew you needed. And if you want to know more about any of the logistics behind this podcast, how to support this little odd show we're having here, please listen until the end, because that's when we'll tell you all about that, because now we don't have any time to lose. It's time to jump back into the absolute wild story of Lizzie Halliday.
That's right, because today is part 4 in our Lizzie Halliday saga. There's so much to talk about. The primary sources for these episodes are the books Killing Time in the Catskills by Kevin Owen and Lady Killers by Tori Telford, as well as a whole lot of research done using Time Machine by the New York Times, newspapers.com, and ancestry.com, which we want to thank all of our patrons because those subscriptions are paid for with your donations. Thank you. Also, if anyone from Ancestry or newspapers.com is listening, do you want to become sponsors and provide these services for free? Because I love you and I can sell it. Okay.
Yeah.
There is still so much to talk about, so here is the absolute briefest of recaps, but we're leaving a lot out, so please go listen to the previous episodes on this case. There's a lot. Okay. Lizzie Halliday emigrated from Northern Ireland when she was a child, and around the age of 15, she marries her first husband, Charles Hopkins, with whom she has her only son, Charlie Jr. She's probably responsible for the poisoning death of a woman named Mrs. Campbell, who had eyes for Charles. After Charles dies in 1881 of what is probably an infection, but also may have been poison, who can say, Lizzie marries her second husband, Artemus Brewer, whose brother believed Lizzie murdered him as well. Husband number 3 is Hiram Parkinson, who she robs but leaves alive. Then the next husband number 4, is George Smith, who she first met at the deathbed of her second husband, Artemus, as they had served in the Union Army together. And I'm not judging. I met my husband Paul at my late husband's funeral, which is a whole story for another time. Lizzie then commits bigamy when she marries George without divorcing Hiram. George also survives despite Lizzie's very sincere attempt to murder him with poison. Also lucky to survive is husband number 5, which most sources say is Charles Plaisdell, but I think, based on some ancestry searches, this might be Charles Blaisdell. Either way, he also survives. Lizzie next resurfaces in Philadelphia, where charges of arson and insurance fraud will lead to her losing custody of the son that she'd been abusing and a sentence of 2 years at the infamous Eastern State Penitentiary. She eventually shows back up in Newburgh, New York, where she will meet her 6th and final husband, Paul Halliday. Lizzie would burn down Paul's home, barn, and mill, murdering Paul's disabled son Johnny in the process, and is never held accountable for these crimes, but is held responsible for a wild day of illegality, resulting in her being charged and found guilty of larceny, but also found insane, and Lizzie is sent to an asylum until the spring of 1893, and then she's finally allowed to go back home with Paul, who has been waiting for her and in the meantime rebuilt the barn as well as a small home for them. They are all on their own until sometime in August, when the neighbors who have all been avoiding the drama next door realize actually they hadn't seen Paul in kind of a while. They reach out to his sons, who come to investigate. Working together with local law enforcement, they approach Lizzie, and the constable says, "Come with me. We'll go find your husband in Bloomingburg, where you say he is, purchasing land. and we'll get all of this figured out. And Lizzie says, okay, great. And she leaves with Constable Scott, who is waiting for word from the search party to arrest her. Inside the house, they find a variety of problematic evidence. There are bloodstains everywhere, dirt all over the floor that are covering up more bloodstains, and a couple of shovels, which make them think that maybe people were buried on the property. But when the men go to search the barn, they see an arm in the hay, and quickly the alarm is raised. And as the body is uncovered, what they find is not the body of Paul Halliday, but the body of a young woman. And this is where we ended last week. And their surprise turns to true horror when they realize it's not one body of a woman, but two women. And they wisely decide not to touch anything else, and they race to send a telegraph to Constable Scott.
I love the way you presented this. You sounded like an old-timey news reporter.
I did that in like 3 breaths. The dogs are here today. We're going to see how it all goes. Fingers crossed. There are no tippy taps or screaming in the background. And what else? Oh, spoiler alert. This is a terrible episode with really gruesome, terrible evidence. It's not suitable for children.
Yes.
That's everything,
I mean,
right?
I think the previous 3 gave that kind of a
I hope so.
All right, Constable Scott is out with Lizzie for the day, and they are going about the motions of trying to locate her husband, Paul, who no one has seen for several weeks. This is when he gets notice from a telegraph that a body has been found at the Halliday farm, and he takes Lizzie into custody immediately. He would later report that during the long drive out and back, as well as during their questioning of townspeople about where they might find her husband, Lizzie acted perfectly sane. Back at the Halliday farm, the site of which would later become known as Murder Gulch, the coroner, Joseph Roach from Wurtsboro, arrived at the farm, as did Dr. Charles Piper, also of Wurtsboro. And they were joined pretty quickly by Dr. Beeks and Dr. Woodruff from neighboring towns. The coroner is quickly able to put together a jury and have an inquest. Coroner Roach has a few tables quickly constructed using boards and sawhorses and instructs the men to lay out the 2 bodies on these makeshift morgue tables. It's the 4th of September, so keep in mind the heat of August and often early September, and these bodies have been buried in a pile of manure for quite some period at this time. One of the bodies has been there longer and is in a more advanced state of decomposition. It's not going to be pleasant, but it's obviously necessary work, and the doctors ask all the men who smoke, please to do so, and the men are lighting up their pipes and cigars. Cigarettes weren't popular until later on. Did we ever come across something like this in our research? I don't think so.
About smoking to cover the smell?
Yeah.
It's the first time that I saw it, and it was mentioned in a whole bunch of newspaper articles, and it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? I mean...
Yeah. It's a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah.
Nowadays, obviously not, but back then...
Right.
Great.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, when they examined the bodies, they were able to ascertain the following facts. The bodies were both women. The one who was more decomposed was older. Her age was guessed to be in her 40s. And the younger woman in her 20s. Both women were in similar night clothes, in undergarments and lightweight sleepwear, suitable for the hot, stuffy summer nights there. The women were both tied up at the wrists with their arms crossed across their chest. They were also tied at the ankles and knees, and the skin around their wrists was red, showing they were possibly alive and struggling before death. They both had clear signs of powder burns on their clothing and obvious gunshot wounds. Both women had marks indicating that they were missing a ring, and the coroner felt fairly confident that both women had been shot while on their backs, and thought they may have been sleeping when murdered. The younger of the 2 was shot a total of 7 times. 1 bullet went through her wrist before reaching her heart. The coroner thought she had been dead for maybe 2 days. The older woman was shot 8 times, all of them clustered close. She also had an old hat tied around her head to hide her face. They thought she had been dead longer, maybe 5 days. And then a photographer and sketch artist were sent for because not one of the people there recognized either of the women. They decided to take another look inside the house to see if they could find any new evidence now that they had found the women. And inside there was blood found all over the place, including blood-stained and cut sheets on the bed. And a close examination led to them finding a .32 caliber bullet near the bed. So they think someone was killed in the bed. And on the bed, they found a bunch of clothing, and now it made sense why Lizzie would have so much clothing. These items clearly belonged to the two murdered women. A delivery driver who was there recognized the label on some of the clothing as belonging to a store in Newburgh. And he also felt sure he'd seen the younger of the two women in Newburgh before. But he didn't know her name. And they also looked at the bloody sofa in the kitchen and thought perhaps another murder had taken place there.
Speaking of bloody sofas, this is happening on September 4th, 1893. And so I thought it was kind of interesting because it was August 4th, 1892, 13 months earlier here in Massachusetts, that the Borden murders happened. Lizzie Borden's father and stepmother were axed to death. And so I just thought it's interesting that the murder of the Bordens is so well known and the Halliday case is so much more obscure. You wonder if people saw Lizzie in headlines and just assumed maybe it was more about, I don't know. It's just very curious to me how that all played out, you know?
I just think it shocked the people more that somebody would kill her own parents. Well, parents' stepmother, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. The sketch and the info on the clothing label was in the paper, which led to more and more people learning about the murders and more speculation about who these women were. Were they random passerbys? Some of Paul's family from Rhode Island? And we do have the post-mortem sketch of the younger woman, which we'll share in the Facebook group and on social media.
Yeah. I just wish they'd drawn her eyes as closed and maybe rotated it so it looked like she was sleeping. It's weird the way it was presented in papers a little bit, don't you think?
I agree. Yeah, it looks...
Yeah. And I don't think we really got into it, but they had family visiting just before they went missing. So that's why I think they initially thought it might have been some of the relatives. They just weren't sure.
So they are searching for clues, they're searching for the identity of these two victims, and they are having absolutely no luck so far.
Yeah. And meanwhile, back in Newburgh, Thomas McQuillan was starting to get really worried about his wife and daughter. We've discussed the McQuillan family in previous episodes. Thomas McQuillan and Lizzie's father had known each other back in County Antrim. I think they were both from Ballymena. And then when they moved to America, they'd been neighbors for a while. It was Tom's son, John, who ran the pub in Philly that didn't have a job for John. That's the same pub where Lizzie scored some free lodging, passing as a lost sister before they realized what was going on and kicked her out. So Thomas, at some point after losing his wife, had remarried a woman named Margaret, and they had a daughter together, and her name was Sarah Jane. This was a working-class family, and over the summer, Sarah Jane had been accepting jobs as a domestic worker, as her mother also did, leaving notices at Mrs. Smith's intelligence office in Newburgh. On August 26, 1893, a woman driving a buckboard wagon with a brown horse arrived at the home of Mrs. Wright, a neighbor of the McQuillans out on Plank Road. She is trying to find Sarah Jane. She tells Mrs. Wright that she is Mrs. Smith, who has come from Walden, and that she wants to hire Sarah Jane for twice the going rate. This is probably the most exciting thing to happen to Mrs. Wright since the neighbors painted their house and she got to watch the paint dry. Like, how much happened back then? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like part of the reason that everybody was in everybody's business is because what else are you going to do?
Oh, it's the same here. You know, I live in a teeny tiny village, and I get excited when the postman pulls up.
That's right. I will say this for teeny tiny villages, though. They're living in a village and they're missed. You know, the fact that Paul is like, people who don't even like him are like, hey, we're worried we haven't seen him. Exactly. Whereas how often do you hear these incredibly tragic cases of people who go missing in cities and they're found, you know, in their apartment years later? It's just...
Yeah.
So Mrs. Wright is super excited to show Mrs. Smith exactly where the McQuillans live. But when they get there, it turns out Sarah doesn't want the job. She has worked all summer and she's getting ready to go back to school at Vassar. Vassar is one of the 7 sisters. In the U.S., you have the Ivy League, and the sisters were the women's only counterparts back in the day. Some of the 7 sisters have been taken over by their Ivy counterparts. For example, Radcliffe was just for women when they weren't allowed to attend Harvard, but now Radcliffe is part of Harvard, which is, of course, co-ed. Vassar was founded in 1861, and it was the second college or university for women. The first was Mount Holyoke in Western Mass. Vassar became co-ed in 1969. So there are some fun facts about 7 Sisters schools. Sarah Jane has worked all summer, and we all know that feeling, right? You've worked really hard all summer, and you just want a week off before going back to study. Totally understandable. So Mrs. Smith says she really wants to hire her. She'll pay the going rate. And Sarah is still not interested. But at that price, her mother is. So Margaret says, I'll go. She packs up some things and she heads back to what she thinks is going to be Walden, New York. Sarah Jane is then home with her father, Thomas. And a few days after Margaret has gone, Mrs. Smith returns without her. She tells Sarah Jane and Thomas that Margaret has had a very bad fall and broken her leg, and that she's going to need Sarah Jane to come help take care of her mother. And so, of course, hearing this, Sarah Jane immediately puts all of her plans on hold. She packs up her things, and she gets into the wagon with Mrs. Smith to go back to Walden. And that is the last time Thomas McQuillan saw his wife or daughter again.
It's so sad. And it's also, I think, the moral of the story is if somebody comes to your house and tries to hire you for double the price, it's too good to be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, back in Newburgh, Lizzie is being led in shackles to appear before Justice Thayer. And when they arrive, there are a couple of teenagers blocking her way. And they're calling Lizzie names and making faces at her, and she seems totally unbothered by this, and even though shackled and restrained, she then lashes out and kicks one of them in the groin, and the other one she kicks in the shin. Now they're not laughing anymore. Then when she's brought in to be questioned, they start asking her about who these 2 women are that were found under the barn. They are asking her where Paul is. And Lizzie begins picking imaginary bugs off her, and she yells that she's got bugs all over her. They don't really kind of acknowledge her behavior, and they keep asking her questions, so they ask her where the gun is. And then Lizzie tells them that if they want the gun, they need to find Paul, because Paul has the gun.
At this time, the thing is, they don't really know where Paul is, and there's some speculation that Paul might have been committing these crimes with her, because she had been seen with a man in recent days who everyone assumed was Paul, and they believed she would have needed help to move and bury these bodies, right? She's tiny.
That's right. Yeah, she's petite. So when she says that Paul has the gun, Constable Scott takes a chance and says, we have the gun, Lizzie. Obviously, he's lying to her, hoping that this information will lead to her confessing, but there is no confession, and she just begins swearing and screaming at him and calls him a liar. There's no use in further questioning her because all she's doing is screaming obscenities and pretending that she has bugs on her. Lizzie is held at Justice Thayer's home, and while shackled there, a steady stream of looky-loos are allowed to parade through the house and make fun of Lizzie or ask her questions. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, this keeps happening over and over again where she just has to be chained to somebody's sofa, and I just keep imagining my brother, who's a cop, his girlfriend being like, oh, not again.
And
someone chained to the sofa all night.
Your house. One incident that is recounted in articles and also in Kevin Owen's book is one gentleman who gets in line to visit Lizzie and then hands her a box of candy. And when she opens the candy box, she realizes that there's not chocolate inside, but rather a bunch of raw, rancid meat. And when she throws this down and swears at the man, he then loudly proclaimed that she can't be crazy, because if she were crazy, she would have believed him when he said that this was candy.
That's not how any of this works. Wouldn't it be great if mental illness was that easy to diagnose? Ugh.
I'm honestly, these kind of things always make me kind of happy. I don't want to say happy, but it's a relief to see that people have always been like this, because that's also the kind of people you encounter on the internet nowadays who think they're experts on more complex things.
Yes, absolutely. Nothing changes. It all
Nothing changes.
Yeah.
Humans just humaning.
That's it. Yeah.
back in Newburgh, Thomas McQuillan is really worried about both his wife and his daughter, and he has asked his nephew to please travel to Walden to get some news of them. And the nephew arrives in Walden and is asking around and pretty quickly learns that there's nobody by the name of Mrs. Smith. But while in Walden, which is located halfway between Newsburg and Burlingham, he does catch news of the 2 bodies found in Newburgh, and with a sinking feeling, he heads that way.
I looked it up just out of curiosity and to see what it would be like Newburgh to Walden. I thought it was interesting if you were going to walk, it would take about 4 hours. And the first road they take you on is actually South Plank Road. So that made me think Plank Road must have been the main road between Newburgh and Walden back in the day. Yeah. It's like 4 hours from Newburgh to Walden and 4 hours from Walden to Burlingham.
So it's all really close by.
Yeah. Walking, that is. It's like 10 miles,
Yeah.
10 miles. It's all very, very close. All of these places in this story are pretty close, except for when she's down in Philly. So back in Newburgh, there's a delay getting her to the Monticello jail. That's where they're hoping to get her moved. So she's just going to stay shackled to the sofa. She's now in Constable Scott's house. And I'm sure, as we said, Mrs. Scott was fine with it. This is fine. And they also asked Mrs. Scott to do a strip search of the prisoner. Lizzie objected to this strip search, and she refused to get completely undressed. But Mrs. Scott was able to find some items on Lizzie. One stocking had $2.19 in change. The other stocking contained $16 in bills. They also found a small change purse with $1.80 in change. And so that's all they've managed to find on her. Lizzie has now been put under heavy guard because there are rumors going around town that there are groups of Romani in the area. They might be trying to break her out of prison. She's being watched very carefully, and when she manages to get one of her garters off and tries to strangle herself with it, she's caught very quickly. This is not the last of Lizzie's attempts to take her own life. They're generally done in a way that would ensure she wouldn't be successful. I'm not sure why this one. There's nothing funny about anybody trying to harm themselves, but for some reason, the idea of her taking like what's essentially a strip of fabric, wrapping it around her own neck and just pulling as hard as she can, you just pass out, wouldn't you? And then...
Yeah. But I've read of people attempting that way.
Oof. Later that night, in the middle of the night, Lizzie tells the sheriff she needs to use the outhouse. And so he and the guards get up and they take her out back to do her business. She walks into the little tiny hut. Everybody knows what the outhouse looks like, right? It's just like a shed with a hole in it. She's in there for a while. They're prepared to wait. It's fine. So they're just standing out there waiting for her to do her business when they hear the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. They are immediately on edge. They draw their own weapons. They think she's going to start shooting her way out of this outhouse. But instead, there's just silence. And then they hear a thunk and another thunk. And then after a little while, Lizzie comes out unarmed from the outhouse like nothing happened. And she heads back inside and goes to sleep on the sofa she's been chained to. So Constable Scott looks at whoever I assume was the newest hire and says, yeah, I'm going to need you to go ahead and search that vault. Vault is a nice way of saying the giant hole full of human excrement. Another shout out to folks all over the world doing these very vital but deeply unpleasant jobs. So appreciate you. And back then, this would have also been really dangerous, right? When you think about the lack of antibiotics at the time. Anyhow, in the light of day, they search the outhouse, and in the outhouse, they find a .32 caliber handgun and 2 boxes of ammunition, of bullets. One of the boxes had opened up and the contents had spilled all inside the outhouse, like vault. So they didn't know exactly how many bullets were missing, but the gun held 5 rounds, so they knew that Lizzie would have had to reload the gun to shoot the women, as they'd each been shot more than 6 times.
Which, if she's stopping and reloading, makes it less likely that this was done in passion. So this isn't Lizzie Borden's 30 whacks or we talked about Candy Montgomery, the 41 hits when she murdered Betty Gore, for example.
Exactly. She'd have to pause to put more bullets in the gun.
Finding the gun and ammunition also gives more weight to the idea that she herself didn't really want to die. Had she actually wanted to end things, she could have just shoot herself in the outhouse rather than hide the evidence, right?
That's right. The gun, for people who don't know anything about guns like me, we have a picture of a Smith & Wesson revolver from around that time period, and it's a typical heavy-looking handgun with the chamber that spins around like a revolver. So you can picture it in movies. It's a big, heavy pistol. The other thing worth noting is that the search also turned up a small, unlabeled bottle, which was determined to be chloroform. That's going to come into play next week, so keep that in mind. All of these clues are interesting because while we know who was murdered and who did it, the way in which everything went down is still unknown and something that all of us are going to have to kind of work together to figure out what we think might have happened, right? Like the order in which things happened. So realizing his wife's strip search of the prisoner was less than optimal, because where was she hiding these boxes of ammunition and this enormous handgun? Right? Yeah, he realizes that his wife's strip search just didn't go well. And now he orders that the outhouse be searched after every time Lizzie uses it, which was a really good move because she was hiding a lot more stuff. A further search revealed 2 rings and a lady's pocket watch and chain in gold with the initials SJM engraved on the back. So, do you think she was a really good hider, or do you think they were too prudish to properly search her?
That's honestly a good question. I could see either way would be possible. From all we know of her, I'd say that she was really good at hiding things, but then also the moment where I realized my prisoness was hiding 2 boxes of ammunition and a revolver.
2 boxes.
I'm gonna have her, I'm sorry, I don't care about anything concerning decency. I'm gonna have her undressed, and if it's against her will, and I'm gonna search all her clothing. All
right? Agreed.
Like, I'm not gonna take that risk.
No.
Joseph McQuillan, meanwhile, has reached Newburgh, and when he arrives, he learns that the older woman was in such difficult state of decomposition that she had been buried right away in Bloomingburg. But they had a lock of her hair to show him, and it did match the hair of his aunt, 51-year-old Margaret McQuillan, and his cousin, her daughter, 21-year-old Sarah Jane McQuillan. So he's absolutely devastated and says that he will bring his uncle, who is an old man of 79, to see his family and identify them, and that he's going to want to have them move to the cemetery in Newburgh if it's really them. And the coroner gently says that he doesn't advise moving the body of Margaret at this time. Thomas then is able to positively identify Lizzie as being Mrs. Smith from Walden, as is the neighbor. And later, at her trial, a devastated Mrs. Wright also IDs Lizzie and also says that she had warned Margaret not to go and that she had thought that Lizzie seemed suspicious and was up to no good. Meanwhile, back at the farm in Burlingham, it is now the morning of 7th of September, and a group of Paul's relatives and neighbors meet up at the farm to try to find some more evidence, or more of a clue of what could have happened to him. So they start inside the house and they notice that Paul's good outfit is hanging on a peg. And this doesn't make any sense because this is the outfit Paul would have worn if he was leaving the house. His other outfit would be for work. I think we know these kind of things. Like my grandfather still was like this. All his life he had the going out outfit and the work outfit at home. And you would know if his head is missing, he has gone out.
That's right. Yeah, my grandpa was like that.
He also had a Grand Army of the Republic badge from his service in the Civil War, and so he wore that all the time with his best clothes, and that was also left behind. You remember that scene in Rear Window when Grace Kelly realizes that the neighbor must have been dead because her handbag is still in the apartment?
Yes.
And no woman would leave without the handbag?
Yeah. Yes.
So then they realized that the floor is just absolutely filthy. And initially they thought that the floor was filthy because Lizzie was trying to hide all of the many, many, many bloodstains. But when they started to clean the floor, one of the neighbors realizes that some of the floorboards looked a little bit off. So they grab a crowbar, which just happened to be in the room and easily at hand.
How lucky.
And they pry up the boards, and that looked weird, exposing the dirt beneath. And so they took the crowbar and they pushed it down into the dirt, which looked loose and like it was recently disturbed. And as they push the crowbar down into the dirt, when they get down about 41 centimeters or 18 inches, the crowbar hits something that feels soft. So it's not like a rock. And the men work together to gently uncover soil from around what we now know is a body. Hands were found first. They were crossed over the chest, tied at the wrist. Paul Jr. stopped looking when they found the hands. And as they reach their face, they find a burlap cloth that is covering the face. And nothing could prepare Paul Jr. for the absolute horror that was awaiting him. It is his father, Paul, and he manages to positively identify the remains, and then he was led away by family and friends to recover from the shock. The men wisely again decide not to do anything more until they notify the authorities. One of the men races to inform Justice Thayer of what they have found, and everyone else gets out their cigars and pipes and opens all the windows and doors to help with the absolute horrible smell of death in that very small shanty of a house. We actually have photographs of the house and the crime scene that we will share. Don't worry, there aren't any graphic pictures of the bodies or anything like this. We only have the sketch of Sarah Jane that we mentioned before. Meanwhile, back at Justice Thayer's, they've come up with an elaborate plan to get Lizzie to the jail in Monticello, and that plan involves multiple horses riding at speed and changing them out as they go, because they are really very concerned about the growing rumors of a possible Romani attempt to break her out of prison. Remember, there were these rumors that she was hanging out with a group of Romani. This is an ultimately unfounded fear we see several times when she's in custody. And while they're trying to get all of this organized, in rushes a man with news that Paul's body has been found and that they need a coroner immediately. Once Coroner Roche arrived back at the Halliday farm, Paul's body was carefully removed from underneath the kitchen floor and placed on yet another makeshift table to be examined. And as we said, everybody starts smoking again to help cover up the smell, and the coroner believes that Paul had been dead for approximately 2 weeks. He had been tied up in exactly the same way as the McQuillan women, so at the wrist, the knees and the ankles. And like the McQuillan women, the coroner believes that he had been shot while sleeping as well, also at close range. He was shot 3 times, close together on the left side. And the most horrific of his injuries wouldn't be seen until that burlap sack was removed. His left temple had a huge gash and obvious bruising. His left eye socket had been broken, and his left eye was resting on his cheek. His nose had obviously been broken, and there was a huge amount of dried blood crusted in his long beard and mustache. After his autopsy, Paul's body was taken to the undertaker in Bloomingburg, and his fellow veterans of the Army of the Grand Republic would claim his body and give him a dignified burial at Walker Valley Cemetery immediately after he was found. Now, we wish we could tell you that Paul Sr. would rest in peace from then on, but actually later on the coroner realized that one of the men on the jury was actually not from their county, but a neighboring one, and so they had to reassemble a jury and disinter Paul to do another inquest before reburying him again. Paul Jr. informs authorities that Lizzie had claimed in front of all of them that she had murdered her husband in Belfast. You remember that maybe? We told you that last week. This is interesting because we know Lizzie sometimes confesses to crimes that she didn't commit, like in this case. It seems highly unlikely that she murdered someone before she was aged 8, I'd say. Lizzie has moved to the jail at Monticello, where she will be under the watchful eye of Sheriff Harrison Beecher. Getting her there was quite the ordeal, and I suggest you read Kevin Owen's wonderful book if you want a more in-depth recount of the incredible mob of people sort of threatening to lynch Lizzie, but unwilling to make the first move. Finally, they make it to Monticello, and Lizzie is locked in her cell, and Sheriff Beecher comes to meet her once she's settled in, and when he greets her, she reaches into her clothing and hands him a silver pocket watch, saying, "Here is a turnip, you can take it down and boil it." And Sheriff Beecher is like, what the fuck? How the hell does this woman still have anything on her? Clearly, this woman has not been properly searched. And so he has his wife conduct yet another search. And Mary Beecher usually works with the female prisoners and she prepares the meals. So she's used to these kind of things.
Yeah, and it would later turn out to be Paul's pocket watch, by the way. So back in Burlingham, they're searching for more bodies around the farm. We mentioned previously that a teenager named George Klein had gone missing along with his wagon. They were neighbors of the Hallidays. And now people started to think maybe Lizzie had had something to do with that. Also, what had previously become problematic interest in the farm became absolutely overwhelming. All the people who had wanted to go and see Lizzie at Justice Thayer's or wanted to go and see the bodies on display while they were trying to figure out who they were, they had arrived too late. And so instead, they decided to swarm the Halliday farm. They lined up, and the newspapers say that the lines were as if people were waiting to get to the state fair in order to get to the house. The crowds took everything they could get their thieving little raccoon paws on, everything from actual floorboards, roof shingles, crops in the ground, plates, pots and pans. They even took apart her buckboard wagon and stole that because it had blood on it. Everyone is just stealing everything they can get, and Justice Thayer is going out of his goddamn mind, and he wants everyone who has taken something to be arrested for theft because they're stealing all the evidence. It's a problem.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. Townfolk are also making their way to see her at the jail in Monticello. And when they arrive, Justice Thayer welcomes them and just lets them parade on in to take a look at the prisoner.
Can you imagine that nowadays?
No. And I think part of it was, today, if something's happened and they want more information about somebody, you'll often see like a mugshot or a sketch on the news, right? But they didn't have that. So if you wanted to see who this was...
Oh, yeah, they want as many people.
Yeah. And I think that's partly why they welcomed them, hoping that some of the people would say, oh, I knew who that is. That's so-and-so. Or
that
she told
sense.
me. I think that's why they let, but it's
still crazy.
So many... Yeah, so many people were attracted to the jail at Monticello that a community band was like, this is a great opportunity for us to shine. And they got together and started performing around. They started at 8:00 at night. What is this, Ibiza? Come on. So Lizzie hated this. She was really not happy about the band. And so then she just started screaming obscenities at them through the window of her cell.
You see, that surprises me because I would have figured her as the person who enjoys being the center of attention.
I think she was screaming when people were cheering for the band. I don't know whether she actually hated the band or hated that the band was taking attention away from her.
Or maybe the noise. Maybe she was like, again, we were speculating that she was a migraine sufferer.
Migraines,
I mean, it's possible.
Sure. Because, otherwise she does sort of like the attention as long as they're being nice to her. She is refusing to eat, and she is telling everyone that her stomach is full of snakes. And the snakes are going to eat all the food she eats, and so the only way to kill the snakes is to stop eating. They force feed her with a tube when her weight becomes like dangerously low. Sheriff Beecher thinks that she's faking it this entire time. He thinks that when she's alone, she's quiet, and that she only begins to act like really agitated and upset when she knows there's an audience. So he thinks for sure she's performing. So then he starts conducting all these little experiments, like he gets a ladder and hides outside her cell and is quiet and then makes a sound like footsteps shuffling to hear her go, wild and start screaming. So he's on a mission. And then District Attorney Hill visits and he observes her and he thinks she's also sane. But he also thinks she has an accomplice and they don't know who this accomplice might be because someone has been seen around the farm at dates that now they know it couldn't have been Paul. So like lots of witnesses of Lizzie with the man, they just assumed was Paul. That's the thing when nobody wants to be around you, no one's looking too closely, right? It's like when someone's trying to do something crummy in traffic and you're like, just don't even make eye contact, don't look at them. It's like that kind of thing. So, in the meantime, Lizzie, as we said, she can't read or write, but she did dictate letters. And we have part of one that she sent to her sister, Nancy. She did not know that her sister had already died when she mailed this letter because the entire family had gone no contact with her quite a while before all of this went down, right? Her brother-in-law and the nieces opened this, I guess it was just this wild, rambling letter. And Kevin Owen has printed the only part, I guess, that was ever shared. Right from the beginning, she's going to, of course, blame other people again and say she's a bystander. That's sort of her deal. But this is one of the only things we have in her words, so we just thought we would share it. Even though it's not the complete letter, it's kind of interesting. So here's an excerpt of what Lizzie dictated. Quote, I write to inform you that I am in prison in Monticello charged with the killing of 3 persons, which I do not understand. Halliday had 6 children. The oldest son of Halliday also wanted to marry me, saying he was younger than his father and had applied for a pension as well as the father. You will observe by this that the father was quite old, having had a son in the army, and the son was married 3 times and had 6 children, and said his son killed all 3 of his wives. The son is drawing a pension of $13 a month. The father, whom I was coaxed to marry, received $12 a month. During last summer, a man arrived at my house and made me acquainted with him. This man was introduced to me as one McQuillan. He had whiskey with him and had been drinking. McQuillan stayed all night and left the next day. My husband invited him to remain a week. I told my husband if McQuillan remained a week, then he would have to take me to an asylum. Then the 2 commenced drinking whiskey and talked of trading their wives. I have 2 lawyers called Smart to defend me. I will let you know when my trial comes on, and I wish you could be here and bring Attorney White with you. End quote.
Is Attorney White not the one she always contacted when she was still living at home? Well, when she was...
It could be. She dealt with a couple of different attorneys, but obviously no one in her family came, no attorney came, and she kind of refuses to work with her attorney. We're going to talk a little bit more about that next week. But I just think this one is really interesting because she's setting herself up as a possible victim. She's saying that, Mr. McQuillan is a drunk and wanted to wife swap me. I guess
he was in cahoots with my husband.
That's it.
Everybody just wanted her and wanted to take advantage of her.
And everybody was beating everybody's wives. I assume she's talking about Paul Jr., but none of those facts are true. So I think this letter is just kind of interesting because, obviously she's not a well person, but she's criminally sane enough to try to be creating these kind of elaborate stories, right?
Yeah.
And we're going to hear more about this next week when she starts talking to Nellie Bly and some of her confessions. And we're probably not going to get into depth with too many of them because it's all just the same thing, right? It's all, I was tied up. I had to watch this. I only saw it as a viewer. I wasn't part of it. I had no choice. Yeah. But the thing that's tricky and the thing that I can't quite work out is the order in which, I kind of know the order in which things happened. So presumably she killed Paul, right? And then do we think that the reason she went to the McQuillans was to get Sarah Jane to help her? Do you think she was trying to intentionally pay back the McQuillans for a perceived slight?
It's so weird, right? Why target them specifically? That is targeted. Okay,
that is
they were
targeted.
looking for a job through the information office, but it's targeted. I think she recognized the name and she went after them. And as you said, maybe it was because she felt that they had wronged her because they had kicked her out of the pub.
The family, yeah. Or she was maybe hoping to marry one of Tom's sons. It's just hard to know, but she definitely targeted them.
Because that would be too much of coincidences here. All these crossovers with this family, yeah.
Yeah. We know she used chloroform on them, which is probably why they were shot lying on their backs like they were sleeping, right?
I'm glad at least that.
I think so.
I know that sounds horrible, but...
No, I know what you mean. But then I think she would have killed Paul. Maybe she had Margaret help her bury Paul, and then she killed Margaret. And then she had Sarah Jane come and help her. These are the things that I wonder about, things to think about for next week. Like, how do we think she went about, like, what are the steps in which, you know?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for today. We have so much to get through next week, including a guilty conscience that's driven to the brink, and we're going to solve a cold case from an earlier episode. And we have another really, really, really brutal, historic, horrific murder. So, yeah.
It's a lot.
Stay tuned.
That's a reason why we have several episodes on this case, yeah.
There's so much to talk about. She's terrible. Do you have anything good this week?
No, nothing.
You want to rant about something you're salty about instead? You want to have a vent?
Also, it's just everything is just fine. Everything is just fine.
Well, that's good.
I'm sorry, I'm really boring this week.
Enjoy that. I feel like that's a rare state.
Oh, I watched, you know what I watched? I'm sorry that I have to talk about it, something I watched again, because really, other than that, my life is so boring at the moment. I'm just doing the chores at home, taking care of the dogs, walking the dogs, exercising, running. That's it. Cooking.
That's good.
Yard work is going to start soon. I have to cut the roses. But anyway, I watched the dating game killer about Rodney Alcala.
How was it?
It was good. It was good. It felt a little bit rushed. Like sometimes I was like, because I know barely anything about the case. So it was a little bit confusing at times for me. With the time jumps and everything, but it was well done. Yeah. And now I want to read a little bit more to kind of get a better grasp of what happened there exactly.
Is it a candidate for Cinema Macabre, or is it a film?
You know what I was thinking? We could do like Cinema Macabre movie editions once in a while that we would also make available for our mystery tier patrons and maybe for our other subscribers on Spotify and YouTube and iTunes. That would be a fun thing.
Oh, that would be fun.
Maybe like once a month or so if we watch a movie like that.
Yeah, we could do that.
Let's see. How about you? Have something good?
It's just I've been like bombarded by medical appointments lately.
Want to bitch about them?
Well, I mean, I guess I'm lucky. It's just exhausting. It's just, it's like this week I had my Botox injections for migraine, my Ajovy injection for migraine, my Entyvio infusion for autoimmune. I need my B12 shot because it's the first of the month and I did do it last week. I'm good. It's fine. It's just been a lot.
Yeah.
I'm tired. But it's, I'm grateful that I actually have all these options, Yeah. The big thing I'm annoyed with lately is it's still like snow. We still have snow and ice here. It's finally sort of going away, but I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but like people who don't clean off their cars of snow and ice and have stuff like flying off their car on the highway, don't do it. That's all.
All right.
I feel like, is there anything good? Do we have...
I think it's fine once in a while that our lives are so monotonous.
We're just, yeah, it's fine.
All right. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, please do us the huge favor, go to your podcast app, leave us a rating and or review, because not only does it do wonders in the algorithm, it also helps us a lot.
Tilda, we're not going to talk about any of your reviews anymore until you change it to 5 stars, girl. You have been leaving us 1-star reviews with long, complicated messages for years. You've been listening to us for years. Give us the 5 stars, Tilda. Then we'll talk.
Anyway, we do enjoy all the reviews. We are so grateful. And when you're already on your podcast app, you can now subscribe for extra content and early access to our episodes. What else? Go to Patreon, check out all the tiers there if you're interested in that. Join our Facebook group for the loveliest bunch of little weirdos out there. And check out our webpage, freshheadpodcast.com. Send us an email, freshheadpodcast@gmail.com. And I think that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, get together, 24th of March. Don't forget that.
That's right. If you can hear Opus, he's telling all your dogs hello.
Yeah, exactly. And we're joining him. Tell all your pets, not only your dogs, all the pets. We said hi, hug them, cuddle them, pet them, brush their hair and their scales, and I don't even know what else. And be kind to them. Be kind to humans out there. And be kind to yourself.
That's right. It's the hardest, isn't it? And just remember, if you're going through hell,
keep going. Tschüss.
Bye.